G'day, I'm Brody. Last week I explained how I made the bed that I'm currently sitting on, that me and my dog are lying on. And this week I'm going to be explaining how I made my kitchen bench, which goes from the end of my bed all the way to my main door.
This is one of my earliest diagrams on how I wanted to make the frame that goes under the bench. The way I set it out is I split the entire 3-meter length into 3 sections. As you can see on the far right hand side, I plan to have a cupboard. Next to that, I plan to have a fridge, and next to that, I plan to have the drawers. I think the middle section had to be a little bit wider just to fit the fridge in, but for the most part, it all fitted correctly. Around the sink area, I had to change the frame, mainly because the sink was too wide for the frame to actually fit. I also ended up removing the frame from below the sink due to the wheel arch and a weird step that sits over the top of that.
This end of my bench has my sink, and it's the end right next to my bed. As you can see, I've got a support on this end which is bolted. If I sort of move you a bit closer, it's bolted into this railing here, and that supports this end.
On this diagram you can see these circles in the corners. That is because I initially wanted the cupboard doors to be sliding. I didn't end up going through with that only because I would have to do a lot more carpentry than I know how to do. Up the top you can see where I've started planning out how I'm actually going to cut all of these bits of wood so that they fit together nicely. Instead of breaking the top section into 3 different pieces of wood, I ended up putting a 2-meter long bit across. Down the bottom you can still see where I'm sort of figuring out what goes where. I've got one beam that goes under the cupboard and one smaller section that goes under the drawers.
The reason I've made the frame only this long, you can't actually see it because the drawers are in the way, but if I move my grey water tank, down this entire row is where the single seats used to be in the bus. As you can see by these, well, this is a bolt hole, but there are plenty of bolt holes running along there that I have bolted the frame into the floor with.
Constructing the bench itself was fairly straightforward. There were a lot of pieces to this bench. Each end had to be cut so that it fit with another piece. Those ends then had to be sanded so that they would sit nicely together. What I'm making in these videos is actually the frame that sits on the floor. Here where I'm adding the vertical supports, it's actually upside down. When I put it in the bus, these get flipped over. I then screw the wood into the top of those legs, and then I put the bench on and screw that in place as well.
Yes, and door with a clasp. Ha ha ha. Oh, success. And this is kind of the most important part of the bus. Obviously I've got my door there with a bit of a to-do list stuck to it. Right next to it I have my first aid kit and a fire extinguisher. And at this end is this big cupboard that I designed. It has all of my electronics in it, and underneath this shelf is actually the batteries that get powered by the solar. Unfortunately, because of that, It's very difficult to see, but there's a beam of wood along the bottom here, bolted into the floor again. Outside, back in. Just for a little bit, okay? So, today I'm going to try something a little bit stupid. It's a very bright sunny day today, and I have actually moved the bus. The only reason I'm bringing that up is usually I'd be able to run an extension cord from my dad's garage out to the bus so I can run power tools. I can't do that. I've moved it a little too far. And I'm going to try and get rid of this corner, which I keep bumping against when I come in. So, I've got the appropriate safety equipment and the tools. However, I am going to be trying to run it off my solar battery. Now, my solar battery is currently in this cupboard and it's at 97%. So, this shouldn't drain it. And yeah, I'm completely dark. I've got my light on. I've been running the aircon. I'm charging phones and stuff. I designed this system so that I could run my computer during the day as well, but my computer's not in yet, so I have so much electricity coming in, it's kind of crazy. But let's see if that can run a power tool. So, I've got my line marked, and I've got my circular saw, which gets plugged in over here. And really, what could possibly go wrong? So, I've marked the line in such a way I know it's not gonna, it's only going to take the bench, it's not going to take anything else. Safety goggles, hearing protection. There aren't any cables or anything under this. I am going to move this cable off to one side though. And here goes. So I had this exact same problem the last time I tried cutting this wood to put the sink in. It's a very hard wood, so there's a lot of smoke and not great. In the original design for my bench, this is actually where my bar fridge went. However, there were some cooling issues.
On the back of a lot of fridges, they have these coils. They're essentially copper tubes where coolant runs through them. And even though it's called coolant, usually it is warm because it's actually taking the heat out of the fridge, running it through these coils, and airflow over the fins at the back here will actually take the heat away from the fridge.
Because that was right up against the wall under here, it did not cool down at all. It just stayed warm and wasted power. What I have put in instead is a cupboard, but you can also see I didn't put a beam of wood along the bottom here just so the fridge could slide in and out. This cupboard's a mess because obviously the bus moves and so does everything in the cupboard. Alright, bit of an empty space, not very clean, but this is going to be my new cupboard. So I have these two cupboards, and unfortunately I have this massive gap running down one of them. because the hinges, it hinges like so, which normally would be fine except for the massive gap. I'm also going to change those ones. So, let me adjust. Now, I've managed to walk some 3-corner jacks in, and they are very painful to sit on. Anyway, it is now the end of the video. I have explained most everything about my kitchen bench. There are a couple of things I didn't cover, mostly my drawers. I did make drawers. They were terrible. So I used old chipboard that I'd found. I cut all the panels out, stuck them all together, got the drawer railings from local home hardware place. Is that a brand name? I forget. The problem is, so as I explained, I built this bottom frame first, put these supports in, and then fixed this larger top frame to it. The problem is, when I did all that, even though I have a carpenter's square, I didn't use it, which... big mistake on my part. And this is oh good, my lunch is ready. This is admitting a few too many faults. None of the corners on this entire bench are at exactly 90 degrees. I sort of eyeballed all of it. So there are a lot of discrepancies. It's why these cupboard doors don't quite line up properly, because as it gets down to the bottom, it actually gets wider compared to up the top, and the drawers were the same thing. As you can imagine, I've tried making drawers all the same size. All I had was a circular saw, which you saw me use to chop this corner off. I didn't have a table saw or anything like that, so all of the cuts were as straight as my hand could stabilize, which isn't very straight at all. The drawers ended up being a little bit misshapen and slightly different sizes, which sort of worked because obviously I needed wider drawers the lower down I got, just because the distance became greater. However, it still didn't quite work out. The chipboard I was using made the drawers pretty heavy, and the forces on them, they just fell apart. The screws didn't go into the chipboard properly. I tried using super glue, but even that fell apart. I will put up a photo of one of the drawers that I made, but yeah, it all fell apart. I have been contemplating just getting something from IKEA that will fit that space, because I can't custom make it, and I can't afford for it to be custom made by a proper cabinet maker. although I have great respect for cabinet makers now because it is not easy from what I have learned. So instead I got a set of plastic drawers which I strapped down with a bunch of straps. I think you can see it in one of the clips earlier. They were supposed to be temporary, but they've been there for quite a few months now. Yeah, this video has been about 5 times longer than my previous one, which is excellent. That's kind of a good record to have. But it is an amalgamation of footage from over the last 2 years. My hairstyle changes, my outfits change, everything about me and the bus changes on a regular basis. I'm going to turn that off. So thank you very much for watching. Please, if you have any suggestions, put them down below. Let me know what you think. If I haven't answered anything, absolutely ask away, because I tried covering everything, but I probably didn't. And subscribe. I will have more. I will be explaining the rest of my bus, and hopefully even... No, not hopefully. I will be having videos of me actually going on trips, because I have been living in this bus for a year now. I don't have that much footage. A wasp just flew in, and I'm going to leave now.